In studying human behavior, it is sometimes necessary to observe all relevant aspects of history. It is beyond argument the impact of Christianity and Judaism on Western culture, and even though people may refuse to acknowledge the influence of their beliefs and practices, they have a great impact on modern Western thought, policy, and behavior, especially in the United States. One main question I've come to in my quest for understanding of American thought is how the social determinism bias came to prominence. In grade school, many children are taught the supposed dynamics of kinetic and potential energy, concepts that confused me as a child because they obviously go against common sense of physical science. In the 4th century AD, Orthodox Christian theologian Athanasius fought what he called the gradual abasement of the soul from truth to falsehood by the abuse of her freedom of choice. Gnosticism is a term that has become ubiquitously conflated with Abrahamic religions, to the point where to say one is agnostic means one has no knowledge of truthful religion. However, it was this supposed knowledge of truthful religion that Athanasius fought against, possibly because he knew that nobody really knows the truth completely. The knowledge of our religion and the truth of things is independently manifest rather than in need of human teachers. For almost day by day, it asserts itself by facts. It is indisputable that culture and religion evolve in relationship to material needs of people and their rulers. Over time, Christian theology has been muddled by human thought and arrogance. The most successful theologians were the ones that worked for their rulers, and success can bring about a certain arrogance. From the time of Plato, the nature of reality had come into question in theology. Was the material world a true reflection of truth? Those who were considered Gnostics of the Hellenistic religion were the supreme academics that worked for rulers to establish common consensus of theology, and that theology was molded by emperors of the time. As Christianity evolved from this to this, a presbyter named Arias went into exile. Vastly opposed by Emperor Constantine, Arias fought the emerging belief of homoousian Christology, the idea that Jesus and God were the same thing. Even though it is well accepted that Christ was a real person, homoousian Christology became the dominant belief today, and it's easy to see why it was embraced by Constantine. One God, simplicity, one direction, easy to rule. 3 ways of thinking evolved over time through the use of the authoritative Gnostic theology. The first, and most damaging, was the preference of mind over matter, or the rejection of the physical world and the truth that it might contain. This is a concept that I stole directly from an article written by a Texan pastor, which fueled my pursuit into this topic. Please understand that, having never been religious, I never saw myself going down this rabbit hole if I didn't see a major problem. I'm only going to put forth one opinion in this discussion, and it's that I believe a healthy human being maintains a balance between their thoughts and the real world, and it is that balance that the Gnostics disrupted. It is well known that in the days of Hellenistic religion, the theology that was pushed was more based in grounded worldly thought, to the point where the theology was widely regarded as a form of earthly entertainment and gossip among people. As Christian theology was evolved by the Gnostics, there came a rejection of gods fornicating, drinking wine, and walking on earth in favor of living by the mind and seeking God through prayer. If you only think hard enough, you can get closer to God. The practice of mind over matter carried on through centuries to the point where today, you can't have earthly discourse of religion because everybody is in their own heads. This created the individualistic culture we have today. The second mindset that was introduced through the Gnostics was potential energy, the idea that just like a snowflake, there is a piece of God in you. As Gnosticism instilled the notion of God within everybody, they created a concept of potential energy, which made it a cultural norm of ignoring disparity in favor of the notion that everybody has equal footing in life with their godly energy. As kings and queens squandered the Commonwealth, this religious Gnostic culture gave them the capacity to absolve themselves while still remaining pious, at least in their minds. It is this culture that evolved as a form of gaslighting over the years in Western culture. As an anecdote, I saw a Facebook post from a friend with a debilitating disease. He was talking about how happy he was to find a significant other after many years without one. A reply caught my attention that said, "Everybody has a hard time finding relationships in life." A reply completely normalized in our culture. He should have used his potential energy. This ignoring of other people's disparity, completely normalized in Western culture, carries on from monarchistic culture as a form of capitalistic gaslighting. With the gaslighting in place, it is the third mindset that took place in Western culture. The culture of deference to authority and authoritative knowledge, whether truthful or not. As Gnosticism became more ubiquitous in Western culture, it manifested itself by pervading Christianity to even its most extreme forms, and even infiltrating Judaism. American Christianity, largely fragmented and unchallenged, retained more Gnosticism and thus became more individualistic as a whole. While Christianity remained in much of the U.S., the religious aspect of Christianity became rejected over time by much of the American population, while the culture of Gnosticism remained as it gave people the comfort of reinforcing their individualistic thinking. Southern agrarian writer John Crow Ransom noted his confusion through the fog of change. In nearly every external respect, the conduct of life in the Western world has changed during modern times, for better or for worse, to a degree which is revolutionary. Religion seemed during this time to change very slowly and very little. The scientific successes of Western man were rapidly altering his attitude toward the world, and altering the program which he elected to carry out for himself in the world. But these alterations evidently were taking place in spite of his religion. His doctrines continued to make about the same demands as ever upon his attitude and upon his program. Westerners therefore seemed to be submitting themselves to a curious dichotomy, half of their minds making a profession which was one thing, and half was indulging in a practice which was another. This mind over matter without community and or religion manifested in the form of American narcissism that exists today, with extreme deference to disparity created by those of authority, and probably most damaging an ignoring of cause-effect relationships in the study of science, to the point where Gnostic culture still remains in today's physical science. Even though the concepts remain as one of the first lessons of physical science in today's academia, it is a fact that kinetic and potential energy do not exist, and is an indicator of bias in today's scientific community against the studying of material cause-effect relationships between things, in favor of social determinism. This is retained from Gnostic culture. Additionally, to those who might argue that the concepts are purely for mathematical purposes, it is no excuse that they are taught as if the energies actually exist. My teacher believed they did. Social determinism, a creation of the Gnostic mind, is reflected in our study of psychology and all of the social studies that are rooted in psychology and human behavior. There is a disconnect between psychology and neuroscience, even though the two should be interconnected fields. The mind over matter bias evolved into a refusal to accept the probability that there is a beginning and end to our natures, and a refusal to accept the physiological cause-effect relationships that affect the way we as humans think and behave. The bias of probable energy is manifested in psychology as a fantastical conception of psychology and a one-sided study that doesn't take the subject's experiences into account. 50% of the information is gone in favor of an antiquated culture. This is a major inhibition to our understanding of human nature and why we behave the way we do. We have the capacity to understand how the brain works by bringing materialism back to psychology. We just refuse to. Whatever you believe, if you were raised in the West, especially in America, Gnosticism remains as a cultural force that affects the way we behave, see, and process aspects of the physical world, and most importantly, how we see each other. In the interests of promoting understanding of our fellow brethren and the world around us, whether atheist or not, Gnosticism remains a heresy for people of faith and a plague on the truth-inquiring mind.